Hey, this is Owen. If you're comfortable, leave your first name and state at the sound of the tiny truck backing up.
Hey Owen, this is Thomas from Virginia, and I was just wondering, on your show this past week, you talked about how treason requires two witnesses, and I thought of the Jehovah's Witnesses practice of the two witness rule, and I was just wondering, like, where did JW get that from? Because I don't think it's in the Bible. Thanks. Love the show.
Very interesting. So, where did Jehovah's Witnesses get the two witness rule thing from? In case you're unaware, Jehovah's Witnesses have this thing where, so Jehovah's Witnesses, they want to set up their own government, essentially. They want to have a structure that when all government services and everything fails, which it inevitably will, according to them, they want to be in place and ready to take control, take the reins of power, and, control society, basically. That's their ultimate goal. So they have this whole system set up, a judicial system, if you will, and they make decisions and everything, all based off of two witnesses. So if a crime is committed, there have to be two witnesses to the crime, which means either a victim and another person who can attest to that, or two witnesses who saw it took place, or something like that. This is actually from the Bible, and I will read the verse to you. Hang on. The verse that it comes from is Matthew 18:16. It says, "But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of two or three witnesses." The context for this is this system was originally used back before DNA evidence existed, back before we had investigators or, police that like we have today, essentially. So you couldn't really believe anybody on their word unless there was a second or even a third person to back it up. This verse was originally supposed to apply to civil offenses, like bring two or three people with you if you're going to sign a contract with somebody, so that those two or three people can attest to the fact that you both agreed to sign the contract together in person. It was a civil thing. He sold me this tractor, I gave him the shekels for it, and it was a done deal. And now they back out and they say they want the tractor back because you stole it. Well, you have two or three witnesses here to attest to the fact that that trade took place. And it wasn't, you stealing it or whatever. It was supposed to be a civil thing. But Jehovah's Witnesses took this and applied this to criminal offenses. And that's what got them in all kinds of hot water with child molesters in the congregation, because if two witnesses don't come forward to attest to this taking place, they don't take action on it. They pretend it didn't even fucking happen. That's the whole root of the issue. There have to be two witnesses or two victims. One complainant, one person coming forward and saying, this guy did this to me. Doesn't matter. They ignore it. Up until recently, at the very least. I haven't heard that they've changed their policies at all. Historically, they've completely ignored it and kept their mouths shut until a second victim comes forward. So what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to make note of that, grievance in their record at the Kingdom Hall. Like, oh, this person was accused of doing this thing to this child, so we're going to put a record on here. And if we hear any reports from another person, then we'll take action. Then we'll call the police. Then we'll disfellowship them. Then we'll do this thing and that thing and blah, blah, blah. So what they were doing was they were writing this down on paper, putting it in their little private area where nobody could see because it's super private information. That person would move to a new Kingdom Hall and then reoffend. Guess what? There aren't two victims. Not that the New Kingdom Hall knows of. There's only one. Only one complaining witness all of a sudden, again. So they'd move to a third Kingdom Hall after that. As soon as it gets reported, they move to a new Kingdom Hall. And this allowed some people, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30 people, I mean, who knows? 2 or 3 very specific cases that we know of. People moving from Kingdom Hall to Kingdom Hall from like the 1970s through the 80s and through the 90s and the 2000s, continuing to offend. 10, 15, 20 kids were victimized by Jehovah's Witnesses for that reason. So anyway, that's the 2 witness rule. That's where it comes from. That's the origins of it. And that's how Jehovah's Witnesses misuse it. But that was a really interesting point about how 2 witnesses are required to establish treason in the US. I hadn't made that connection. Why don't JWs have a database of child abusers? Do they have one and keep it secret? They do have one. It is known for a fact that they have one. That was admitted in open court, that they have a database that they will refuse to release to anybody. A database filled with the names of people who have abused children, but only once, or at least once. Not necessarily reported to the cops, not necessarily reported to the victims or other possible victims or any of that. It exists, and I understand that they estimate it's around 23,000 names total.